We're ready to start session 6's Q&A on collaborative web archiving. We have two endeavors featured in this session that are both projects involving a collaborative nature. We have empowering bibliographers to build collections, the Browsertrix Cloud pilot at Stanford Libraries, which is a project that has Stanford's web archivists, technical staff, digital humanities staff, working with subject specialists in the library to determine how Browsertrix Cloud could fit into their web archiving program. And then we have What Next, an update from Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, or SUCHO, as many of you know of it, which is a project which is, one of the hugest collaborations I'm aware of, other than like the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. But it involves more than 1,500 volunteers working together to help protect the digital cultural heritage of Ukraine in the face of Russia's invasion. So let me remind you to please use the Q&A feature to ask questions of our speakers. The session is being recorded, so you can submit questions anonymously. You can also upvote questions rather than duplicating a similar question. And there's closed captioning available if you'd like to turn that on. You can also use Zoom's reactions feature to interject any nonverbal feedback. So introducing our participants for the Browsertrix Cloud presentation, we have Quinn Dombrowski, who's the academic technology specialist in the Division of Literatures, Cultures, and Languages, and in Stanford University Libraries, and serves on their Web Archive Services team. Quinn also has taken a lead role in many digital humanities projects, including non-English ones, has started a textile makerspace, which I think just is awesome, and is a co-VP of the Association for Computers and the Humanities. Quinn is so prolific, also on the SUCHO project presentation today, presenting also with SUCHO co-founder Anna Kijas, who is the head of Lilly Music Library at Tufts University, where she is interested in the exploration and application of digital humanities tools and methods in the historical research, particularly in music, and in the application of standards, including TEI and MEI for open access research and publishing and use of minimal computing. We also have Andreas Segerberg from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, who works as a research coordinator in their Department of Psychology. And then yeah, that's all. Sebastian is not here today. So welcome all. Could we start off? I know people have had the opportunity to watch videos of your presentations. So maybe just we'll recap, keeping in mind we only have 30 minutes for our session. Quinn, could you, regarding the Browsertrix Cloud pilot, could you give us a brief summary of the goals and the process for participants in the pilot?
Yeah, so what we ended up doing was we worked with Ilya Kramer to do a 3-month kind of pilot subscription to Browsertrix Cloud. We got an instance specifically for Stanford users, and we opened it up to anyone in the library, along with a few people outside the library who heard about it and thought that it would be useful for helping them collect research data materials. And we basically, let it be an all-you-can-eat buffet of web archiving. You fill out the form to get an account, and you just go do it. It was I think very much kind of in the spirit of SUCHO of you see a thing you want to capture, you can go capture that thing. And people did. In the recordings we have examples from 2 folks who tried it out as part of this pilot period. There were other colleagues as well, including some who had no background whatsoever in web archiving or technical things in general, and people actually were able to capture stuff in a way that wouldn't have been possible with our current Archivit setup. I think there's some open questions still that I'd be happy to chat about a little bit about how much of it is technical challenges versus administrative challenges and process challenges. And I think sort of just the open free-for-all thing really sort of liberated people in a way as much from our administrative processes as anything. And so that's something that we're going to be thinking about as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the SUCHO update, Anna, could you give us a quick summary of what the SUCHO project is, in case anyone doesn't already know, and an update on the status of it right now?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, or SUCHO, we are a global grassroots initiative, and we are at this point close to 1,600 people in our SUCHO Slack channel, if I'm mistaken. We began this initiative on March 1st, 2022, just a few days after Russia invaded Ukraine. And our main goal at the time was to web archive websites and online content that was either being created, curated, or lived on websites of cultural heritage institutions in the Ukraine. And we were able to web archive over 5,400 websites approximately, and save 51 terabytes of data in the months following the invasion. So our goal was to web archive this content in order to prevent it from going offline. And our intention has been and continues to be to, keep that material safeguarded so that we can hand it back to institutions if they need it, if their servers have been destroyed, if their content has been lost, and so forth. So since last year, essentially, we've been working on taking that web archive content and curating it. And so this has taken on a variety of different shapes, which you'll hear a little bit more about from, I think, Andreas and Quinn as well. We have a gallery that we've been working on where we are curating a selection of web archived content to essentially raise visibility of these cultural heritage materials in Ukraine, and also bring in other folks from our volunteer group, as well as students and educators, to help us curate this content to make it more visible, raise awareness. Another big aspect of the work that we've been working on since the summer of last year is equipment donations. And so one of our volunteers, Ekaterina Maligna, has taken a key role on focusing on coordinating equipment donations to Ukrainian institutions so they can do the digitization work themselves, and they can prioritize what they need to digitize or protect in their collections. So in addition to digitization material and equipment, we've also sent generators and other kind of protective materials that they need in order to even run the electricity, charge their phones, charge cameras, things of that nature. Another component is fundraising and grants. So as you can imagine, in order to get equipment over there, we have to be able to purchase the equipment, and that takes a variety of forms. We have individuals who are sending in donations through our Open Collective platform. We are also getting grants and funding from different organizations, higher ed institutions, as well as corporations, in order to help to support this effort. I think I'll stop there, and we can maybe, if there are specific questions, I can get into things a little bit more in detail at that point.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the effort that so many people have been putting into SUCHO is pretty amazing. Andreas, in the presentation, you spoke about some of the open source tools that SUCHO has been using. Could you speak briefly to the choice of moving data from Google Sheets to the open source tools Browsertrix and Dataset, and how this has facilitated curation of material that has been collected?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. Yeah, so SUCHO, when we started out, it was important to use ready available tools that were familiar to people. So Google and Google Sheets was a quite natural choice to coordinate, because you can have simultaneous access and editing and stuff like that. But when you do like an emergency web archiving effort, you care about like collecting the stuff and documenting and enriching the metadata later. So we decided to move from Google Sheets to Baserrow, which is a no-code platform that offers like this same familiar experience with working with like a spreadsheet-like user interface, and it's a low threshold for end users to use this system because it's basically a spreadsheet, but it offers powerful features such as linking between tables, and it also offers webhooks. You can certainly, integrate with Google Sheets, but it's a bit more cumbersome, and comes with some rate limits and stuff like that. But when you have a system that you host yourself, you're in the powers of, you have no rate limits and stuff for making API queries and stuff when you do integrations. Base-row has a great support for like listening to events if a row is changed or if it's created, which allow us to integrate the metadata instantly with other software like Dataset. And it also offers a very well documented API. So to sum it up, you could say that Base-row gives us control over the data, and it keeps it simple for volunteers to keep contributing, but still gives us the ability to do more advanced operations like integrations with other systems.
Thank you. Back on the Browsertrix cloud pilot project, Quinn, in the online recording, it featured 2 participants from the trial, Felicia Smith, who's the Racial Justice and Social Equity Librarian at Stanford, and Alex Keener, the Digital Scholarship Coordinator, who thought the interface was generally easy to use, but they also had some trouble, just trial and error, and encountered some kind of weird behavior, probably because the tool is still under development. But beyond the 2 of them, how much interest did you have when extending an open invitation for being part of this pilot? And of the people who attended, who went on to use, how many of them went on to use Browsertrix Cloud, and what sort of feedback were you getting generally?
Yeah, I mean, it's the usual situation that you get with this sort of thing. I mean, we probably had like 40 people sign up for the initial tutorial. Maybe like 30 of them actually showed up in person or on Zoom to like, learn the basics of how to do it. Unfortunately, we ended up losing some momentum just because the fall was a bit wacky and we weren't able to get the pilot started right away. We hope to go seamlessly from the workshop into the pilot, but like due to funding and just set up it and just time that goes into coordinating any of this, it took until January, which unfortunately led to some drop off in our user pool. I mean, we probably had on the order of like 6 to 8 people like using it to a considerable degree. Other people used it off and on. I mean, I used it to archive a few dynamic digital humanities project websites that I think would have been challenging for Archivit to capture, just due to the nature of like all the JavaScript and whatnot. I think part of the reluctance we had of people engaging on this was the fact that like it was framed as a pilot and it was not really clear sort of like what would become of it. Like, were they just doing this as an exercise? If they captured websites, like would that data go anywhere or would they be able to use it for anything? Because, by releasing the chains of our policies, like they had these sort of non-conforming things at the end of it. I think what I'm hoping is that, as we move forward with this, we were just talking yesterday about our hope of being able to do a sort of pilot deploy of this as something more like a service for at least a year. By ironing out some of the kinks and having a clearer workflow of like what happens to this stuff. And like, yes, it's not just going to like go off into the void. Like, yes, you can actually use it to collect things that will be part of our collections. We'll be able to get more people to use it, even casually, like as they see things online, empowering them to like go capture it and not, not have to go through like a long process of approvals and submissions and so forth.
Switching back to the SUCHO project, Quinn, hopefully it's not too confusing to people, but you talked about, let me just switch over to these questions over here that have been submitted. We have one about the SUCHO meme wall, which is one of kind of the projects you all were curating that Quinn talked about in the presentation. Annie Ward asks if there were any copyright risks with republishing memes, and do you get any source info for the memes, such as who created them?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the tricky thing inherent to memes. We actually have deliberately not been publishing things like political cartoons and things where there's like a clear like sort of attribution and creator as part of it. Like it's not part of kind of like the norms of meme creating to like sign your name at the bottom of it. Like you make a thing and it sort of goes out in the world. What we have been tracking is where we get them from. So there is a source URL for all of them. But I mean, realistically, that's where we happen to come across them. There's no reason to assume necessarily that like that's where it came from, especially in this situation of the war. You know, there are plenty of people who maybe like don't want to like, you know, be making a big deal about the fact that they created, you know, a meme, you know, that you know, has some spicy commentary that goes, you know, across the globe. So I mean, in general, it's not something that we have been concerned about. I mean, we have a contact info, and so if someone really wanted to try to like, you know, ask us to take something down, that would be possible. But I mean, just sort of the freewheeling culture of memes, and the way that they sort of like spread across the internet anonymously, you know, makes it I think harder to make a like ownership claim in any case. And you know, we're certainly not the only site that has these things. We're just the only site that is kind of aggregating them and providing the annotation and you know, some degree of provenance info for it.
Okay, and Lorena Ramirez Lopez also has a question. She's interested in the hardware donations and coordination that is so amazing with the SUCHO project. Is there any advice or templates that is shared on how that was organized? This is something that they want to coordinate with South America, but there are a lot of blockings and obstacles present with customs.
Yeah, maybe I can say something about that. And I could just agree to that it's very difficult. Yeah, I once said that there's a reason for that. There's a higher education for logistics, and I didn't take that course. And yeah, you need to, yeah, it's really difficult. And I think having someone on the ground doing the work is key. And we have that now with Ekaterina. And that's made like the big difference for us to actually make it happen on site. And one thing that we started with, like donating equipment, we thought of for various reasons, because we got donation from Amazon, then it was that we bought stuff in Germany and from other sites within Europe, but we didn't buy it inside Ukraine. And that was something that we realized a bit late, but nevertheless, it was also a key to buy the equipment. If it's available within Ukraine, it's been much easier with customs and stuff to actually buy the stuff for the institutions from Ukraine, which also is a good thing because you stimulate the economy and whatnot. So it has positive side effects too. So I would say that's my key advice, to try to buy it within the country if it's possible, because you avoid a lot of problems.
That sounds like great advice. Anna, you presented a slide in the SUCHO update with counts of verified damage to physical locations in Ukraine. Have you all looked at a correlation between these locations and organizations' websites and digital objects going offline?
We have done some of that work. So that slide in particular is from the Conflict Observatory, which has been monitoring the potential damages across cultural heritage sites in Ukraine. And one of the things that we've been doing is looking at what we've web archived and how that correlates to some of the locations and the buildings, institutions, et cetera, that are being damaged or, you know, destroyed or looted. And so we've taken sort of a strategic approach in which objects we've curated in our gallery. For example, we, in the base row inventory that Andreas spoke about earlier, we are building this inventory of all of these institutions based on our web archives, in order to be able to accurately identify what we have web archived, which institution it belongs to, and also keep track of, are those locations damaged, destroyed, or looted. So that work has been happening. In terms of the sites going offline, one of our volunteers, Benjamin Schmidt, has done some visualization work, and I'll find the link and post it in the chat in a moment, where he's tracked network outages essentially, right? And so there are other groups that are doing this as well, that are tracking network outages in Ukraine as well as other areas around the globe. And what we've noticed is that when there have been large-scale missile attacks, especially in November, for example, when many buildings were hit in, I believe it was in Kharkiv, was a correlation with the networks and the internet, literally, the outages really going, what's the word I'm looking for? Being quite high, I guess. So there was a very literal dip, right, in the network. So we have seen that. We can't supply accurate numbers or percentages of how many websites have gone offline. But let me see if I can find it here. See. I have a chart that I've used. I think, was it Andreas and Quinn? Can you remember, was it like 10% of our websites that the content that we web archived, or was it a little lower than that?
It depends on when. I mean, in October, like there was a plunge.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was somewhere between like 10 and 20%, like throughout the course of, and again, like which ones were up and down, like very, day by day, week by week. But once the concentrated attacks on the power infrastructure started, things started getting bad.
Yeah, and we have been finding, even recently, right, certain websites that have completely gone offline that we were able to web archive. So I think that's still part of the work that we're doing as we're going through the inventory to identify what's up and what's not.
Okay. Quinn, in wrapping up your recorded presentation about the SUCHO update, you brought attention to how y'all had expected not to still be collecting and curating data so much now. Instead, hopefully you'd hope Ukraine would have emerged triumphant already, and you'd be working with the cultural heritage organizations in the country to get their data and websites back up. What sort of preparations or contact have you had with Ukrainian organizations to facilitate this repatriation of websites and cultural heritage objects once the opportunity arises?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not been the trajectory of the war that we were hoping for. And I think we're in a situation now where what we're focusing on is the connecting institutions with digitization equipment. I mean, that was the thing that kind of has led to these ongoing relationships and contacts, with a variety of different institutions throughout Ukraine, some of whom we have web archived their websites. But it's been an interesting situation insofar as, when we started this project, we swore that, like, we're just the web people, we're just doing what's on the websites, like life will be so much easier, if we all just like, stay in our sort of virtual space. But I think it really highlights the importance of, listening to your partners on the ground and responding to what they say that they need, which is what sort of took us into the kind of digitization equipment space to begin with. And I anticipate that, the work that we're doing to kind of listen to what people need and help them get those things are going to lay the groundwork for the relationships that we'll need going forward to do the digital repatriation when that time comes. Depending on how long this war goes, we may need to start doing that even before the war is over, as the country is thinking big picture about its digital infrastructure, its digital preservation. And some of that stuff can't wait until the war is over necessarily to start being built. So, I mean, this really is a moving target that we're navigating month by month. And, in the meantime, listening to the Ukrainian cultural heritage workers and, trying to respond to what we hear from them.
There is a question from Anonymous here. They seem to remember that there being an API for identifying availability on the live web. I presume this is about SUCHO and sites going offline. What are you using for that?
Yeah, it's correct. It's not an API. Actually, I built the API for internal use, and it's merely for us or anyone enabling to query and visualize the content or the collections that we have, the up and down status for the websites in the collection, and it's under the hood, so to speak. It's a script that pings the sites, all the sites that we have in our inventory, and I do it once a day and check for whether the site is still down or if it's up. And the API that I showed you, it's just data that you can query through an API. So there's yeah, that's how it works.
Okay, we have just a couple more minutes for questions here before we have to wrap up. I did want to give Quinn a chance to talk any more about the Browsertrix Cloud pilot and lessons learned that you want to share with folks about the project and where you're going from here.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of reflecting on it, I think one of the things that we're going to need to think about as we move forward is, you know, what are our goals here? Like, what are we trying to archive? Like, for what purpose? Are we actually trying to build either like a comprehensive or like a curated, you know, topically selected collections of local web archives? Like, what is sort of like the grand vision from like the library's perspective as a whole about like what Stanford Libraries wants to have like in its own local web archives collection? And then once we are clear on that point, you know, actually look at the processes that we have in place for collecting that data and curating it. And then ask if those processes are working. Like, is this the process that we need to have to get the outcome that we want? And if not, like, we need to sort of rethink how we handle these processes. And I mean, it's a lot of things that involve, you know, arm wrestling at the, like, you know, higher levels of library administration, questions of, you know, who's going to pay for this, you know, questions about, you know, who can make the call that something deserves web archiving, like how much review do we want to have versus like empowering individual bibliographers. But I think those are important questions to ask, you know, after you've had a web archiving program for several years. I mean, it's easy for structures to kind of like build themselves up organically, you know, kind of as a web archiving service is growing. But, you know, having a moment to reflect and step back and ask some of these big picture questions and then reevaluate how you're doing things, bringing in new tools, simplifying processes, perhaps, you know, rethinking like a central funding model versus, you know, individual groups paying is really going to be beneficial for all of us.
Thank you. So we're about out of time. I'd like to thank our speakers. There's been some great examples of working outside of the policies of institutions and what can be achieved by individuals working together. So thank you. And thank you to those who have asked questions and attended. And I also want to thank Robin, Kelsey, and Olga for organizing this online day. So those of us not traveling to Hilversum have been able to participate in these conversations around web archiving.